Uh, Welcome into the room, everybody. Welcome into the room. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our learning space this morning and this afternoon, wherever you are across the country. This is the National Training and Technical Assistance Center, and today we are talking about systems of care in early childhood education, and I'm so excited about it. Next slide, please. Before we get started, I just want to share that although we'll be sharing rich conversation and viewpoints today, it doesn't necessarily represent the views of SAMHSA, who is our partner and our sole funder for our Intact project. Next slide, please. We know technology, and we had a couple glitches before we got started. So in the event that we have any type of technical issue, we'll make sure that we send folks another link to end this session and sign in a new session, but hopefully that will not happen. Next slide, please. All right, so on the screen, you see all of our thought partners at Intact that's helping us do the work. So when we're producing webinars and coaching sessions and listening sessions and all of these wonderful learning spaces, it's because of folks on the screen. And so we're just so grateful to be in community with all these leaders across the country. Next. So our vision for Intact is really closing opportunity gaps, right? Standing in the gaps for children and families, right? And communities. And that's through consultation, peer learning exchanges, coaching opportunities, training academies, communities of practice, digestible reads, podcasts, and so much more. So when we think about the work that we're doing, we're standing in the gap, and we're committed to that here at Intact. All right. So for folks that have not followed us yet, if you have a second, take your phones and scan this QR code. We have our virtual summit coming up, and we're super excited. We're accepting proposals because we want to hear from you. We want to know what you're doing in your region, your territory, and your state, what that looks like with your systems of care work. How can you come and stand in the gap with us? So take a moment, scan it, and we want to hear from you. And we'll share this at the end of our learning session today. All right. And commonly asked questions.
All that stuff is in your car.
Commonly asked. Yep, and so commonly asked questions. We will have a certificate of completion available for folks, and we have the information here right on the screen with Joanne that's helping me moderate today. This actual webinar is going to be recorded today, and it will be provided. And after we finish our 3 sessions, y'all, we're going to be creating this very detailed resource brief because we want to make sure, yes, we're coming in community. Yes, we're going to have rich conversation, but what's going to be the takeaway? So after all 3 sessions, we'll be compiling meaningful resources to take back to your organizations and communities. So be on the lookout for that. Super excited. All right, next, please. All right, y'all. Without further ado, we are gonna get started. I am Lisa Knight. I am just a facilitator here. I'm in community with y'all today. So I'm just excited to share this space with my dear colleague and friend, but I am a research instructor at Georgetown University. But before all things, I'm a parent advocate. And I'll allow Melissa to introduce herself.
Yes. Good afternoon. My name is Melissa Burnett, and I am a family and community engagement supervisor with Lutheran Service Florida Children and Head Start Services.
Thank you, Melissa, for sharing this space with me. And just a fun fact, Melissa and I used to work together in Head Start. And I thought this was the perfect person to join the conversation because in Head Start, we may call it comprehensive services, we may call it service delivery, but it's all systems of care work. And so we are going to dive right in. Next slide, please. So today, our goal is to make sure that we're increasing what we know about trauma and trauma-informed care for infants and young children. We're going to learn about systems of care in early childhood, and then we're going to look at some strategies to navigate systems of care in our local communities. Next, please. All right. So in the chat, I want you all to take a moment and I want you to share, what role you have in the program and then what state, region, or territory do you live in? And I also want to share that we do have a Q&A option at the bottom of your screen or your electronic device. And so further on in our conversation, Melissa is going to take the wheel. And if any questions come up for you, I want us to utilize that Q&A chat because we want to make sure we're asking these questions that take back to our programs and our communities. So in the chat, tell us the role you have and where you're located across the country. And yes, we will have that QR code again at the end of the session. Thank you for that. All right. Thank you, Megan, Development Director. Awesome. Hey, Regina. All right. I love it. I love it. We have a lot of folks here: Ohio, North Carolina, Cleveland, New York. Awesome. Illinois. I'm gonna be in Chicago in November presenting at a conference, y'all. I'm so excited. California, I'll be there too in a couple months. All right, I love it. Keep coming because this is our community, right? We're all over the country. We're all working with young children and families. We're all doing this work. So I always want to know who's in the room with us. All right, next slide, please. All right, so I am a huge proponent of social emotional check-ins, not just with children and teachers, but everybody. So in the chat, I want you to tell me how you feel. Are you a one? Are you a two? A three? Are you all of the above? Because before y'all logged in, we were at a three, trying to figure out our tech issues. And I think right now I'm at a one. I don't know. Melissa, how are you feeling?
I'm still at a 3, but I'm getting down to a 1 because I'm still having technical issues.
And we're working through it, aren't
Champion
we?
right on through. Yes.
Right. We're working through it. So
Yes, definitely.
Dr. Walter Gilliam is one of my favorite researchers, y'all. So he did a groundbreaking study in 2005 on preschool expulsions. And his research really illuminated teacher bias, racism, disproportionate discipline with young children in preschool, particularly Black children, Black boys. And anyway, he is a storyteller and a champion for mitigating preschool expulsion. And recently he shared this quote, and it just stuck with me because I am a parent advocate before anything. And it says, we can't talk about the health and well being of young children without talking about the health and well being of those who care for young children. And that's us. Right. So I want to make sure we're always checking in with ourselves, we're grounding ourselves. And if we're at a three, it's okay to be a three. We'll work our way to a two, work our way to a one. But I think it's so important for us just to say, man, I don't even really feel it today. What are some things I can do to regulate and calm myself, get my nervous system calmed down? Because this work is a lot. So anyhow, let's move it on to the next slide. All right, y'all. So this is very special. This is the animated series that my colleagues at CARS just developed, Amanda and Remy. It's a filmmaker and an illustrator that I had an opportunity to work with, and they chronicled my story of preschool expulsion. And I'll tell you a little bit why. After we watch this, I'll tell you why this is so important to the work that we do. So let's go ahead and get this started, Joanne. I never thought that my journey advocating for my son would bring me to this platform, but here I am, and I'm very grateful to be in this shared space. My name is Lisa, and my son is Christopher Jr., also known as CJ. Our story is about preschool suspensions and expulsions within our education system and parent advocacy. I share my story with you as both a parent and also a doctoral candidate researching this very topic. My son was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, also known as ADHD. And while this was helpful, it was just the tip of the iceberg. I wanted to dig deeper and go beyond the diagnosis. The reality is that preschool expulsion isn't a problem solely linked to a child's behavior. It's directly linked to racism, bias, school policies, and staff burnout. So, in what ways do we see the whole child and consider the system and adults surrounding our children? At 9 months old, CJ attended a privately owned family childcare home, and by the age of 2, he was labeled a bully. His dad and I made the tough decision to withdraw him and move him to a high quality center based preschool. The first year was pretty good until the behavior calls occurred daily.
Mm.
I had no idea what this ride would be like, but it sure felt bumpy, frightening, and exhausting. As the calls
Yes.
continued, the school had ideas of what they thought was happening with CJ, whether it was potential speech and hearing loss because he didn't listen, benign seizures because he daydreamed, or developmental delays. And all of these presumptions were linked to his behavior. I followed up on every suggestion, but he passed every evaluation. As a parent, I grappled with the next phase in our journey because I was sitting in denial and fear. I remember the day like yesterday. We were at the soccer field. The coaches were giving clear instructions to the team, and CJ was prancing around like a teenage mutant ninja turtle. He struggled to focus and stand still. He was in his own little world, happy as can be. After the soccer game, we went to a local grocery store and I met a mom with her son who displayed similar characteristics as CJ. After an hour-long conversation, she recommended her neurologist. I made the appointment and he was evaluated. Soon after, CJ was diagnosed with ADHD. The diagnosis gave us answers and opened my eyes. I learned how to advocate by asking hard questions regarding bottom line policies and equity. According to the Office of Civil Rights data, boys are disproportionately disciplined the most, but Black boys are suspended and expelled 3 times more than their peers. When people ask me, what's the solution to end preschool suspension and expulsion? You know, it's such a multifaceted answer with more than one solution. I'd start with awareness, building capacity within our education systems, and the other piece is advocacy, making sure that we're advocating for our preschoolers and their families, normalizing feeling seen, heard, and a sense of belonging. My story, y'all. That is my story. That's why when I opened up, I shared that I'm a parent first because I've been in early childhood education for 18 years. So I have been in this systems of care work for 18 years, but I have been a parent advocate for 13 years. And this is just it's a lot of what we do, right? When we're thinking of families and young children and systems and elevating family voice. I just wanted to share that with y'all. I did receive a few messages, and we'll make sure we send out the YouTube link so y'all can share this in your networks. But I want this to be a moment for us to pause and just to kind of start thinking about what's one thing, what's our takeaway, and just thinking about this before we even get into the conversation. What's our takeaway, and what's one thing that we can start thinking about when we leave our time together today? Let's go to the next slide. So today we will be talking about trauma, and so we recognize that certain things may come up for you all. And if you have to take a break, come off screen, whatever that may look like, we want you to do those things for you to regulate and just take time for yourself. Next, please. All right, so I always want to define trauma just to make sure that we're always already on the same page, right? And so we know that trauma happens when something frightening happens, but it's difficult and overwhelming for us to deal with that. Whether it's like a water crisis, like Flint, Michigan, whether it's a death in the family, death of a pet, a loved one is sick. It could be a parent or a family member incarcerated. It could be divorce. It could be domestic violence. It could be preschool soft suspensions and expulsions, where the kid is having disruptive behavior and he's moved from classroom to classroom, and now he can't make friends and he knows that the teachers don't like him. Right. So many different ways that trauma shows up. And we want to just make sure that in this context that we recognize what trauma actually is. Next slide, please. And so why do we focus on trauma in young children? And I think when I think about this in a larger context, we think about how rapid the brain is developing, but we also think about when we see children from different walks of life and different families, and we go from what's wrong with that child, what's wrong with that family, really shifting that to what happened to them or what's happening with them. And we have to think about different levels of trauma and those adverse childhood experiences and how that impacts that rapidly developing brain. And so we know that all of these are factors into what we see in our programs, in our communities. And so we want to make sure when we're having conversations about systems of care that we're recognizing trauma, we're trauma attuned, and that we're normalizing the conversation when we're engaging. Next, please. And so systems of care work. So when we first started, y'all, I was sharing how Melissa and I used to work together in Head Start. I got Regina on the call. She used to be my behavior specialist at Head Start. And we call it service delivery or comprehensive services, but we're doing the work, right? And so we got folks from all over today. And so we're eventually going to hear from you. But by definition, systems of care is community-based services where we're supporting children and youth that may be at risk for mental health, right? It's a coordinated network. We're anchored in these meaningful partnerships with families and youth, and we're culturally and linguistically responsive. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in the next slide. But our ultimate goal with systems of care is to improve outcomes. Next, please. And so some of our values are the main values are being strength and need based, making sure strength based really focused on what are the gaps that we can close and what are the needs that need to be met, right? Making sure that we're adaptive, flexible, but also relational in the context of how do we have a warm welcome and a warm handoff when we're working with families. But thinking of being culturally and linguistically responsive, do our services match our community? So if we're serving communities that may speak multiple languages or have different cultural backgrounds that may not match ours, what are some of the things that we're doing to support those communities? What are some of the things we're doing to bridge those gaps? Making sure that we have conveyors, making sure that we have messengers and folks feel welcome in the work that we're doing. So these are just some of the core values that we hold with systems of care. Next, please. And so in the chat, I want y'all to tell me, what does systems of care look like in your state, region, or territory? Because we know it all looks different. When Melissa and I worked for Head Start, we had different service areas and we had different processes, but the whole outcome was to serve families and children. So tell us right now, what does it look like in your area? All right. So it's a variety of outpatient services, inpatient, home intensive. All right. Foster care children are being served. So it's a variety of systems of care work happening throughout the country. Mm-hmm. All right. Very good. Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. So some folks are talking about how SOC is defined for elementary through adults, but not in early childhood. Melody, listen, this is why we're here today to talk about it, right? Rita said Head Start, food pantries, daycare, early intervention, in homes, childcare. Jordan talked about communities coming together to bust barriers that prevent families from thriving. I know that's right, Jordan. Let's bust those barriers down. Yeah. So that's what this is, right? I think it's important for us to have these conversations, right? So we hear about systems of care for older populations. So this is why I created this space. I wanted to make sure we have our space in early childhood so that we can talk about some of the things that we're experiencing in our own work. Next slide, please. And so in systems of care, whether we call it systems of care, whether we call it communities of practice, advisory boards, service delivery, comprehensive services, whatever it is, all systems of care is rooted in the same core values. We all have the same sustainability issues. We can't work in silos to do this work. And so there is a need for that interagency collaboration. There's always going to be a governing structure with any type of systems of work that we're doing in our respective programs. And we do it in a way that we promote individualized services in natural settings. Gone are the days where we're giving families 10 different providers, 10 different offices to go to for treatment and therapy and all the things that are overwhelming. Gone are the days where we're just distributing out, right? And so, and one thing that we do grapple with is that mental health stigma, right? And so that's a whole nother tough conversation to have. But these are some of the tenets of systems of care that we all experience. And I just wanted to make it okay to say in this space. Next, please. So today I wanted to make sure that it wasn't just me doing all the talking. I wanted us to make sure we talked about what trauma is, how we define it. I wanted to make sure that we all have an opportunity to say, hey, this is what's happening in my area. But now I'm going to turn it over to Melissa, and I have some questions for her. And we're going to hear her perspective on what systems of care looks like from her work and her perspective. So I'm going to be asking you some questions, Melissa. And we are going to get it started. So again, if any questions come up for y'all, I want y'all to utilize the Q&A area because we want to make sure we're addressing everything before our time ends today. We're doing good on time. So Melissa, our first question today. First of all, I want you to tell us your role and tell us what you do. Tell us what you do in your systems of care work.
Okay, my name once again is Melissa Burnett, and I am a family and community engagement supervisor. And what I do is that I basically every day advocate for children and families. So we have families coming into our program because we're a Head Start and early Head Start program, and we also take expected parents. So with that, every day, even starting at the application phase, that our system of work starts right at the beginning when they either apply online or if they come into our office.
Very good, thank you. And I think that was a good summary of a few things you do because you do a lot in Head Start, but a lot. And I just appreciate you giving us a brief synopsis of some of the work that you do. So I want to talk about understanding systems of care and barriers. So tell us, how would you describe systems of care in the context of early childhood?
Okay, how I would describe system of care is that right at the beginning of our process, when a family is trying to enroll into our program, its systems of care starts then. It starts at the application phase because on our application, we're asking an array of questions because what we do is layered. So when they come in to apply for the program, they're, giving us their information. They're trusting us with their information, like where are they at educational level? Are they homeless? Does the child have a disability? Did the doctor indicate something? Does the parent have concerns as it relates to her children? And also, we ask all of those questions. So right at application phase, whether they enter our program or not, that we're connecting them with resources immediately. So, because as we all know, if the family is broken or something is broken within that family, is that we're not going to be able to serve them in whole. And when I say not serve them, it's because the parents are not ready to be served because of they have a lot of other barriers that they are facing.
You, Melissa. And I couldn't agree more. And I think it's so important that I heard you say write an intake. And I think that is something so important. It's so many opportunities that it's so many things we have to check off our checklist, right? But
Yes,
the first piece of really trying to build that relationship is right at that entry point. So I just appreciate how you uplifted write an intake is when we start the work. Tell
absolutely.
me, what are the main challenges or barriers that families face when trying to access equitable, high quality services and supports?
Well, sometimes families are not comfortable. They're not comfortable identifying their needs. So we have to be able to, they have to be able to trust us. So we have to build that relationship so that they would be able to, you know, uh, um, so we will be able to identify exactly what's going on with the family. Because a lot of times families are afraid to, at the beginning, to be able to tell us exactly what's going on. Example, if they're homeless, sometimes they may not tell us because they're afraid that DCF is going to come in and take their children. Or even if their child is, if they feel that their child has a behavior issue, sometimes they won't tell us because they're in fear of that nobody wants the child into a program. So right then we have to be able to build trust and create a safe space for our families so that we can get over all of those barriers.
Yeah, and I appreciate that because you're right. I wonder how I would feel if I was transient and I was houseless and you're asking me all these questions and I'm thinking, are they judging me? You know, what do they need this
Absolutely.
information for? And so I would pause too as a parent if those were my experiences. And I don't know, it makes you wonder what folks are carrying and what that really looks like. And do they feel safe enough? I heard you say safe. Do they feel safe enough to share that information for you to hold on to? When we think about systems of care and comparing it to service delivery, what distinguishes service delivery from systems of care?
Okay, what distinguished service delivery from systems of care is that we have to be able to follow up. We have to ensure the connection. If we are giving our families resources, then we need to be able to go back and to ensure that the family actually connected to the resource. Because by giving the family the resources, if they didn't do anything with the resource, or they have no direct person that you can refer, that you refer them to, sometimes the families do not connect with it. So for me, service delivery is making sure that they connect with the resource.
Yeah, that connection is key because what if I'm too overwhelmed to do any of those things,
Correct. And
right?
absolutely. And I think, our role is that we have to make sure the resources that we're connecting with are still in service. I know a lot of times people refer people to food pantries that they're taking, you can come Tuesday and Thursday. Well, we need to be able to ensure that that is still the delivery days for that resource. And a lot of times we just have an old piece of paper and we send our families out and we don't know if that's their last bit of gas that they're getting there or that they're asking people to give a ride. So I think as an agency, as agencies, we need to make sure that the resources that we are giving our families are valid.
Yeah, yeah, that's important too. You're absolutely right.
Yeah,
Because funding changes, grants change, staff change,
absolutely.
it changes, relationships change. This work is constantly evolving. So
Absolutely.
when you talked a little bit about service delivery, making sure that we're connecting families, and we even talked about barriers to following through and making sure that things are still in place. How do these concepts differ in their approach and with implementation when you're looking at serving different families?
Well, each family is different and unique. So we have to be able to not lump all of our family in one because the family makeup may look the same, but the needs are totally different. So a lot of times we have to take the time to find out exactly what each of our families need and make sure that we're connecting them to the right resource.
Yeah, and I love that. I love how you talked about the adaptability. I love how you talked about individualizing those services and family
Mhm.
needs. Yeah, because it's something about us telling folks what to do, that power struggle, opposed to really seeing what the needs are. What are the
Absolutely.
actual needs that we can support with opposing us saying, well, this is what we think you should do, right?
Right.
So let's talk about data, because I think that when we have these conversations about systems of care, serving children and families, we have to talk about data. So tell us, what types of data do you rely on to guide your decisions and practices when working to enhance systems of care work?
Well, we rely on our family outcome survey, which we sit with the families and we ask them an array of questions like positive parent child relationship, family as lifelong learners, family as learners, family well-being. And then we do that 3 times a year. So we look at whether the family is thriving or whether they need services and different things of that nature. And so we look for gains, or if the family has dipped in that area, then we see what we can do with that, see what it is that that family needs at that time to be able to connect them with different resources, or it may be something new that is going on with the family. And so we try to look at that. In addition, we also use our Child Plus to help us. That's our database where we go in and we put everything in as it relates to family notes and different things of that nature. We have our developmental screens. We use the Frog Street curriculum. We do Brigance. We have Ready Rosie, which is it's a parent program where the parent can actually sign into Ready Rosie, and there's all different types of resources that they can share with their children. We also have Teaching Strategies Goal as an assessment, and they do the six phases with that. And so we have an array of data that we actually use in order to be able to assist the families.
I love it. And I heard you mention some social emotional curriculum. I heard
Exactly.
some assessments and I heard some developmental screeners that are very familiar. So let's talk about that a little bit. I want to deviate to the social emotional piece. What are some ways that you partner with other folks in the community or other service areas in your program to make sure that we're having these check-ins about social emotional development, making sure that parents understand what that is, having these conversations about emotions, because it all relates back to trauma informed care. What are some ways that you partner with other folks?
Well, we partner with different people. We partner with different community partners, such as the Department of Health. We partner with my mind just went blank, but we do with that. But what we do is, when the kids come into the program, they do those 45-day screenings. And so once they do the 45-day screenings, then we can actually look to see exactly what it is, where the child scored, what the child's score was. And then at that point in time, the teachers would explain that to the parents. And then our role as family and community services, what we do, we would meet with the families to, if the family, if they failed those screenings, we would meet with the families to talk about, completing the referral process, and then we would send it to the disability coordinator who would forward it on to fiddlers.
Okay.
So,
Mm-hmm.
right.
All
So we
right.
do partner with fiddlers. We partner with our local education agency. We, whatever the needs are for the children, we do partner with, we have partners for that.
And it's something about that interagency collaboration that I really appreciate with systems of care work. Because if you have a family and then a child may have some developmental concerns happening, or it could be anything, those 45-day screens and Head Start programs are going to help us capture it. It may not capture everything, but it's going to give us a snapshot. And so that's entry into the next steps. Now, what do we do with the information that we have? So thank you for sharing that. And we'll be
And
continuing to, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, and one more thing, we do have what we call pre-staffing, to address parents' concern, because on the application, the parent may identify that she has a concern with the child's behavior, or the physical may identify that. So we don't shut the parent out of that process at all. We have a pre-staffing so that the parent can, express their concern. And then we put systems in place to ensure that the child has a safe space within the classroom.
All right, wonderful. I love that there's a space for families to come in and talk about what their concerns are, but also to their expectations. Because I think it's also up to us as caregivers to say, hey, this is what we expect from this program. Like, I think we have the right and we have the autonomy to say, we want this. We want our child to feel safe. We want our child to feel like they belong. We want our child to feel like they have voice. And so it's something about giving power to families and reassuring them that they are the expert. So when we talk about the impact of trauma on systems of care, based on your experience, how does trauma attunement influence the development and effectiveness of system of care work?
Sometimes, a lot of times that it becomes that trust and fear factor. So we have to meet our parents at their level. And we have to be careful, that we don't simplify it too much, as to insult the parent. So I think a lot of times that we have to, kind of be careful, and then that we'll be able to address the family's needs at that point.
Right. You're kind of moving away from what's wrong. What's wrong with this family? Why are they
Right.
this way? They're coming in here. And I've even been to different presentations, and teachers would share that maybe they got cursed out, or maybe a family was aggressive. And these are realities of the work that we do. But I always wonder, what are they carrying? What are they carrying?
Exactly.
Was it a warm welcome into this program? Does anybody know that their child could have been kicked out of 3 other preschools? Does anybody know what they're going home to? Does anybody know that their water could have been turned off? Like, when I hear those stories, I don't want to take it away from anybody's experience, but I always wonder what happens when families come, and this is the experience, right? I wonder what's behind that layer. So then tell me, and thank you for sharing that about just becoming trauma aware, because that's what it's about, really having this conversation about trauma-informed care. But how should these systems be adapted to address and support young children and families when we really think about trauma and the work that we do?
I think it should be adapted with, I think, as long as we have that trust. And I also think that it's the connection. You have to be able to develop that relationship with that family to be able to make the systems of care make that work. Because a lot of times, if the family don't trust you, they're not going to, they're not going to move through the process. So they have to be able to trust you in order to be able to move through the process.
Yeah, I agree. I remember when I used to train teachers on the pyramid model, we would have these conversations, and the teachers were just like, I'm overwhelmed. It's either them or me. I got to go. And I just remember I had to intervene a few times. And after speaking with the family for 30, 40 minutes, they would pour everything out. I would learn all these different things about the families that the teacher hadn't known yet about, because that trust hadn't been built. It wasn't that safe space created yet. So it's something about creating safety around conversation. So you give people access and the comfortability to open up and say, hey, I'm not okay. I'm stressed out. I'm struggling. I do need help. And sometimes we don't even know how to ask for that help. So
Exactly, because like I am the type of supervisor, I'm always hands-on. So I'm going to be in a caseload. I'm going to see what the barriers are, with that family, and I will develop a relationship with the families. I was working with a family because I was, working a caseload. Um, and I called the family to say, hey, in order to complete everything, this is the thing that I'm missing. And the parent shared, she's like, I'm sorry, my husband passed away last night. So I'm like, whoa, I didn't even, because we had not built that relationship at that point, I didn't even know the husband was even in the hospital. But then after I continued to call her every day after she told me that that he had passed away, we developed, a relationship. So now, she's trusting me with all of her information of what she's going through and exactly what her child is going through, because her child just went through the fiddler's process. She says she's not in denial about anything, but about her child. But however, she said she felt comfortable enough to be able to share that with me. So once we build that relationship with families, I think that we would be able to, everything will be successful. Not saying we'll be without problems, but
Right.
it will be successful.
We didn't say easy, but we
Right.
said successful. That means we're closer to closing opportunity gaps. We're close into creating solutions and building resources, right? So
Exactly.
thinking about key stakeholders and systems of care, who are the essential agencies, services, community stakeholders, and policymakers involved in creating effective systems of care? Who are
Well,
they? Who are the people?
so I would say for Head Start in our organization, we start right with our governance structure, with our policy council, and which is comprised of 49% community and 51% of parents. So who's better to be able to tell you exactly what is going on with, besides the community partners and the 51% of the parents? They're able to let us know what are the trends that's happening in the community, because a lot of times we don't know what's going on, in the community as far as trends are concerned. And also we partner with the Department of Health. We partner with our our child care partners, DCF, Access, the dentist office, pediatricians. We have our health advisory committee. We have our ERSI committee, which ERSI stands for, eligibility, recruitment, selection, enrollment, and attendance. And so we have our LSF board of directors, with the Early Learning Coalition, our local education agency, Fiddlers, Early Steps. So they help assist us with helping our families to be able to take to the next step.
I heard you say HSAC. And so for the folks
Yes.
that are not Head Start folks on the call, tell us what HSAC is.
It's our health advisory committee that is comprised of nurses, mental health providers, parents, staff, dentists, you know, just people connected with health and mental health services that's on that committee. We even have people on the committee that does screenings, that does speech and language screenings. And so that's what our health advisory committee is. So those are the folks that's doing the work with our agency.
Yes, thank you for spelling that out for us. And also a Head Start, we have our HSAC, but also sometimes some folks will have a disability advisory board. But you mentioned some
Right.
of those key stakeholders. I heard you talk about behavioral health, heard you talk
Right.
about speech and language. That's where we would have physical therapists there, occupational
Right.
therapists, ABA therapists, right? We're going to have those folks, infant and early childhood mental health consultants, right? And so tell me why these partnerships are so crucial in the process and the work that we do.
Well, I think it's crucial because it will help, it's the work with the children that we do, and they're able to provide a supportive environment so that the child can be successful. So we need all of those stakeholders, not only just the child, but the family, because if the family is not healthy, then the child is not going to be healthy. So And a lot of times too, we have to be careful when our children enter into our space, because we don't know what trauma that they had the night before. So, some of our families are facing eviction. So that could be something that just came up. So that's why we have those committees, so that we can make sure that we have that safe space for the children so that they can be successful.
Absolutely. All right, Karen is the Infinite Mental Health Consultant. Hey, Karen. Right. And so I love it. But so that's what I heard you talk about, is building capacity. I heard you talk.
Yes,
So those partnerships help us build capacity. Those partnerships help us build resources. They help us close these opportunity gaps. And you're right. We don't know what happened the night before or that morning, right? I re-
absolutely.
I remember when I was a practitioner coach, I went to one of my preschools to go train some teachers. I had my coaching notes, my checklist, and all these things. And the teacher came to school that day. She had taken the bus. She was already pregnant, and she came to school with sunglasses on. And when she took off her sunglasses, she had a black eye. Okay. And that was in the morning time. And I'm thinking, I had this whole coaching agenda, right? And the teacher who just took the bus to work had a black eye. Do you think we're going to talk about some coaching goals, or we're going to talk about how are you feeling and how can I help you? And I think it's something about, you mentioned earlier about meeting folks where they're at, creating safety around the conversations that we have. And we may have agendas, we may have checklists, we may have all these program requirements, but how do we get to the people first? And what does how does the message land? And so these partnerships that we create in our systems of care work is so important, because we can't do this work on our own. And that's what I love about systems of care work, the interagency piece that we have.
Right.
So,
Sometimes we have to learn to pivot, and
mhm.
we can't keep sometimes we can't keep our same routine of what it is, as you stated, like, this is what my day is going to look like. I mapped it out, and sometimes we have to pivot. And I think a lot of time we don't want to pivot, because we want to do what it is that's on our checklist to mark it off, and a lot of times we can't.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I love the word pivot. Pivot is powerful. It's power in pivoting.
Yeah.
It's power in pivoting with the work that we do, because there is no instruction manual for this work. So when we think about pivoting, when we think about becoming trauma attuned, making sure that we're meeting folks where they're at, using data to make decisions, being anchored in relationships. When we think about preschool suspensions and expulsions, what strategies have you found most effective in reducing suspensions and expulsions in preschool?
Uh, well, that as I think all around, not just an individual organization. I think that's the part that most struggle with. So I think we have to be able to, we have to meet as a team, and, you know, and invite the parent. That's what I was talking about earlier, like have that pre-staffing so that we can meet with meet with the parents to see, to ask them some questions about, about their child, about the behavior, about, trying to see if that's what happens at home, the same thing that is being experienced at school. But I think a lot of times too, in order for the parent to be able to be open and honest, we have to have that relationship in order to get the information that we need, so that that family could be successful, and that that child could be successful in the classroom. And I think once we make the parent comfortable, then we can ask those hard questions, because a lot of times what we find out is that parents don't want to tell us what's going on with the child if the child is even experiencing some hardships, some behavioral things, because of fear of we're going to put them out. And so I think we have to create that safe space and say, hey mom, as we're meeting with, meeting with the parent, this is a safe space. We're not trying to expel your child. We're not trying to do any of those things. What we're trying to do is to make your child comfortable in the classroom. So how can we help? So we meet with the family so that we can come up with a plan on how we can best serve the child in the classroom.
Yeah, and it's something about relationships. I remember when my baby boy was facing preschool expulsion, and in the journey of advocacy is so exhausting. You were there
Mhm.
with me when I was advocating for him.
Absolutely.
Every day it was something, but nobody ever asked me how I was feeling. Nobody ever asked me, how did it, how are you doing? We know we call you every day. We know we complain every day. We know you get these behavior notes. I think it's space for us to pause and ask the families how they're doing and feeling when they actually feel comfortable enough to open up, right? And
Right.
so just from my positionality, I'm really conscious about that, asking folks how they're doing, just like I did everybody on the call today, doing that well check, because it is a lot of work when you're going into programs and you don't trust the system, right? Because the system has shown you so many reasons why not to trust them. And this is from a parent's perspective. And so just thank you for sharing that, having that multidisciplinary team meeting, having the parent at the table, reassuring the parent they're the expert, but also letting the parent know it's a safe space and we're not going to use this against you. We're not going to be looking for
Absolutely.
stuff. We're not trying to catch anything. We're literally trying to help you, and we want to support you. So thank you for sharing that.
Right.
We
And
have
another thing, Miss Knight, I think also too, we as providers, I think too that we have to be able to change our mindset about a lot of things as well in order to make it successful for the child. We're not going to have cookie cutter classrooms. Everybody is not going to be the same. And so our role as family services, when we come into the pre-staffing, we let them know this is an only child. There's no one there except for the child and its parents. Or this child comes from with a family of 7, and this child is the youngest, and the oldest may be 16. So we try to provide a what the family looks like, what the family dynamics are. So, and I think that we as providers, we have to sometimes take a step back and put ourselves in our family's shoes.
absolutely. We have a question in the Q&A chat, Melissa. It says, do you have parent training curriculum that you use besides Ready Rosie?
No, not at this time. We don't.
All right, Sean was asking that. Okay.
Nope.
All right, very good. And we only have a few minutes left, y'all. So if y'all have any questions, we got a lot of engagement in the chat. Folks are resonating with your conversation, Melissa. It's a lot of good information in the chat. But if there are any questions, we want to make sure that we're utilizing our Q&A. All right, very good. So we got that going. So I have one more question before we wrap it up and get to our ending slides. I know folks want to see that QR code again. When we think about trauma-informed care resources for educators, what resources or tools do you recommend for early childhood educators to better understand and implement trauma-informed care?
Well, we utilize the TBRI, which is the trust based relational intervention. And most of our staff, we're trained in TBRI, how to handle behaviors and different things that goes on in the classroom. Even though I am not in the classroom, I am, trained for TBRI. So, and I think we have to look at the whole child approach and to be able to care for our vulnerable children. And so, and that is the foundation of Head Start. And so when we're talking about systems of care, this is what we talk about in comprehensive services.
Yep. Thank you so much, Melissa. Y'all, this conversation has been so good. I could talk about this stuff all day. I am so happy we were able just to
Yes,
have this conversation, have this dialogue. The chat has been booming all day. Such good feedback. It's so good just to hear from everyone. Kathy said the whole child approach, meeting them where they are, is critical. And that is nothing
absolutely.
but the truth. So we just appreciate y'all. We're going to get the slides back up just so we can close everything out. And we just appreciate this conversation today. It's so good.
Love it.
Yes, we appreciate everybody for joining us today. This chat has been recorded and it will be shared. Can you get a copy of the presentation? Absolutely.
Mhm.
Can you get a certificate of completion? Absolutely. We'll make sure I also send out the video of our animated film of preschool expulsion for you all. We'll make sure to get you that YouTube link, and please share within your spaces, your communities, your organizations, even with families, because I want to inspire hope and change. Next slide, please. All right, we will have a survey that we're going to share because we want to hear from you. We want to know what are some things that you all want to hear about. I heard folks in the chat say we don't talk about systems of care enough in early childhood education. Tell us that in the survey, and we'll continue to do more events like this because we want to create a space for our early childhood folks. So make sure you complete the survey when you get it. Next slide, please. All right, here's our QR code. Some folks, there it goes. Lydia, you see it? Take a moment, scan that QR code because we want to hear from you. Our summit last year was amazing. We had so many presenters from all over the country talking about systems of care work, what they were doing in their respective states, organizations, tribal communities, regions across the country. It was amazing. But we want early childhood on the map. So I want to make sure y'all are scanning this QR code. Whatever, if y'all are in an early steps program, doing Part C, early intervention, Head Start, whether you're a privately child care home, family child care home provider, center-based home care provider, community org, let us know. We want to hear from you. What are y'all doing in your community? But how can y'all give us more knowledge? Let us knowledge share, spread awareness. So we want to hear from you on that. Next slide, please. All right, stay connected with us, y'all. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. You can access our website at intactmentalhealth.org, where we have all of our events, all of our recordings. You can even request TA support and consultation, our publications, and everything else. We got newsletters. Listen, I got a podcast coming out next week, y'all. I'm so excited. Anyway, check us out and be sure to follow us at Intact. Next slide, please. All right, here's our contact info with our email, our phone, website. You can download our flyer, and here's another link, a direct link to request TA for your state. If you're having consultation, you need in need of consultation, whatever that is, y'all reach out to us because we want to make sure that we stay connected, we stay in community, and that we remember that there is power in pivoting. All right, next slide, please.
That's the last one.
Okay, never mind. That's it. Okay. All right. I thought we was gonna thank Samsons again. So we're just grateful, y'all. That is it. We have enjoyed our time today with y'all, and we hope to see y'all again for the next 2 Fridays. We have a new guest speaker next Friday. It's gonna be so good. You do not want to miss it. And we will see you then, 1 p.m. Eastern time. Y'all have a wonderful day and an amazing weekend. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Bye.
guys.
Bye, guys.